In this presentation, we'll be looking at scales and scale degrees, being able to swiftly identify and recognize different scales and understanding the function of the scale degrees within those collections will be crucial to becoming fluent in understanding various aspects of music theory, from form and function to chord structure. We'll begin by talking about pitch collections in general. Many cultures will organize groups of pitched sound into collections called pitch collections. Many of these pitch collections are conceptualized into a string of pitches. These pitches will be considered to be adjacent to one another. In common practice era music, these adjacent pitches are referred to as being related by step. These pitch collections will often carry with them certain systems of acculturated meaning and expectation. In other words, some parts of the pitch collection will be expected to be followed by other parts or other pitches. In the common practice era, this system is usually referred to as functionality, which is basically just a ritual, a series of cultural expectations that one thing should be followed by another thing. In common practice era music, these pitch collections will be referred to as scales, and the individual pitches within them as scale degrees. In common practice era music, scales have the following attributes. First, they consist of 8 notes connected by step and arranged in stepwise order. 2 notes are traditionally considered to be separated by step if they are adjacent on the staff. In other words, if one is on a space and the next is on the line immediately above or below that space. If arranged from lowest to highest, the scale is considered to be ascending. If arranged from highest to lowest, it is considered to be descending. Scales in this style will begin on a tonic pitch and end on that same pitch an octave above. Therefore, most scales have 7 different notes and 1 repeated note at the end, an octave above. There are a variety of different types of scales. In the common practice era, we'll be looking at 2 major types, the second of which breaks down into some subtypes. So we'll be looking at the major scale as well as the minor scale. The minor scale has 3 forms: the natural minor, harmonic minor, and melodic minor. It's worth pointing out that the melodic minor is an outlier. For the major scale and natural and harmonic minors, those will look the same and have the same pitches whether they are ascending or whether they are descending. For the melodic minor scale, it will look different in its ascending form and its descending form. Therefore, we'll be looking at that one last because it's an exception to the rule. Let's begin with the major scale. The major scale displays the following elements. It begins on a tonic pitch, contains 7 discrete pitches arranged in stepwise order, and ends on a repetition of the tonic note an octave above when we are looking at an ascending scale. It is also arranged in a pattern of half steps, the distance between 2 immediately adjacent notes on the piano, and whole steps, equal to 2 half steps. And accidentals are used to modify notes when needed. All major scales, regardless of what note they begin on, have the following interval structure, beginning from the bottom note and proceeding upwards in an ascending pattern. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step, or WWH, WWWH. So, let's take a look at a couple of examples. Here's a C major scale. You'll notice that the C major scale has no accidentals in it. We begin on C, and then move up a whole step to D. We then have another whole step from D to E, a half step from E to F, a whole step from F to G, a whole step from G to A, and a whole step from A to B, before we return to the tonic note, C, where there's a half step. And even though A major has some accidentals, it is still the same interval structure. Whole, half, whole, and half. So all of that leads us back to the tonic. Now, as you can hear, if you are familiar with common practice era music, you are probably expecting certain notes to follow. If I played this A major scale and stopped on that G sharp, you're probably wanting to hear it resolve to that A. So if I resolve to somewhere else, you'd probably be surprised or excited or maybe annoyed, depending on how you deal with unexpected sounds. So let's talk about those tendencies, and let's give a name to those scale degrees so that as we go through these videos, we'll be able to talk about specifically different scale degrees and how they function. In tonal music of the common practice era, in other words, music which has a ritualized progression towards the tonic pitch, the pitch classes of the scale have specific names and numbers and are referred to as scale degrees. Now, it's worth noting a few increasingly specific definitions here. When I say a pitch, I refer to any note on a keyboard or any other instrument that is creating a pitched sound. However, a pitch class includes all pitches which are an octave apart from each other. So, if I play 4 different A's on the piano, those are 4 different pitches. They are discrete pitches and they have discrete frequencies. However, they are all the same pitch class. They are all A's. So 4 different pitches, but 1 pitch class. Now, we can become more specific by giving them a scale degree, by saying where they are in a given scale. So A will have different scale degrees whether we're in C major or whether we're in A major. So a scale degree is a pitch class as it functions within a specific scale. In other words, all A's in the A major scale will be the tonic pitch. Let's learn the rest of these. You've heard me mention tonic before. Tonic refers to that first scale degree. It is our home base. The note above the tonic is the supertonic, or literally the note above the tonic. The third scale degree is the mediant. Notes which are a third away are considered to have a mediant relationship. The fourth note of the scale is known as the subdominant, the fifth note as the dominant, the sixth as the submediant, and the seventh note of the major scale is the leading tone, and that leads us back again to the tonic. Note there's no scale degree 8. Once we get to the leading tone, we start back over at 1. So you'll note that each of these scale degrees has a name and a number, and the scale degree number is indicated by a caret, that little pointy thing on top. If you put that caret on top, it's assumed that you're talking about a scale degree. And the reason that we do that is we tend to use a lot of different numbers in music theory, and it's easy to get to mistake them from each other. So having that caret on top helps us to understand that we're talking specifically about a scale degree. It's worth noting that it doesn't matter what major scale that we're talking about. All major scales are going to have the same nomenclature. So here we are in A major. We have, again, tonic, supertonic, mediant, subdominant, dominant, submediant, leading tone, and tonic. Everything is going to be relative based on what is the starting note of the scale. A couple of things that might seem curious at first. It may seem strange that we have the mediant as scale degree 3, and we have something called the submediant, and it actually looks like it's higher than the mediant. Why would they name it that way? Well, what we're actually looking at is a relationship to the tonic. So if you look at the last tonic note, that high A, and work backwards, it makes more sense why it's called the submediant, because it's a third below the tonic. The mediant is a third above the tonic. Likewise, I remember thinking when I first learned these names, well, the subdominant is called the subdominant because it's the note below the dominant. A, B, C sharp, D, there's our subdominant, and then E is the dominant. But actually what's going on there is it's talking about relationships by fifth relative to the tonic. Remember, the mediant was a third above, the submediant is a third below. Likewise, the dominant is a fifth above, the subdominant is a fifth below. So just a couple of things there, and as we go through these different presentations, we'll be talking about how some of these scale degrees tend to have specific functions. So let's talk now about how we can create a shorthand for using all those accidentals that we were seeing in that A major scale. So rather than writing out all those accidentals, what we can do is use a key signature. A key signature will be used as a shorthand to indicate which accidentals are to be used in a given key or scale. The number of accidentals form a pattern that is based around the circle of fifths. Now I want to use this image as something that we can come back to. So here we have a circle, and at the top of it we're going to put the key of C, which we saw had no accidentals. There are no sharps or flats in the key of C. We can tell how many accidentals we want in a key by creating a circle of fifths that looks like a clock. So we're going to start with C, and then we're going to go up by fifth as we go in a clockwise formation. So we are going to go C, and we're going to go up a fifth to G, and G is going to have one sharp. And this is going to continue around the clock until we have all 7 sharps present. So fifth up from G is D. That's going to have 2 sharps. A fifth up from D is A. That'll have 3 sharps. A fifth up from A is E. A fifth up from E is B. A fifth up from B is F sharp. And a fifth up from F sharp is C sharp. And now we've gotten around all the major mode keys that have sharps in them. So G will have 1, D will have 2, A will have 3, E will have 4, B will have 5, F sharp 6, and C sharp 7. To find the keys that have flats in them, what we're going to do is we're going to start on C, and we're going to work in a counterclockwise pattern. And as we move counterclockwise, we're going to go down by fifth. And each progressive key will have one more flat than the key before it. So we go down a fifth from C, we get F. We go down a fifth from F, we get B flat. Down a fifth from B flat is E flat, and then A flat. And here's where it gets a little bit confusing, because then we go down a fifth from A flat, and it's D flat. And you'll notice that D flat and C sharp occupy the same space. That is because they are what's called enharmonic. Notes that are enharmonic are the same pitch on the piano. A D flat is the same thing as a C sharp. And so they will be the same note, just spelled differently. And there's there's 2 more enharmonics. That's going to be the key of G flat, which is the same as F sharp, and the key of C flat, which is the same as B natural. So there we have our circle of fifths clock that's going to be able to tell us how many sharps and how many flats. Now we know how many sharps and flats, but we need to know which ones we put there. So the accidentals which appear in these key signatures will always occur in a specific order. So we'll begin on the left-hand side. We'll talk about the order of flats. The order of flats is B, E, A, D, G, C, and F. So if we're in a key with 3 flats, we're going to start from the first one in that list and list off those first 3 flats, B, E, and A. So, or the example that I have up here, a key with 4 flats would have B, E, A, and D, specifically in that order in the key signature. And as a shortcut, if you need to tell what major key you're in by looking at the key signature, you can look at the second to last flat. You'll notice that there's no second to last flat in the key of F because there's only one. That one you just have to memorize, that F has 1 flat. If we go over to the right side, we'll talk about the order of sharps, which is F, C, G, D, A, E, and B. You'll notice that the order of sharps is the order of flats just backwards. So therefore, a key with 3 sharps would have F, C, and G sharp in that order. And as a shortcut, you can tell what major key you're in by looking at the last sharp and going up a half step. That last sharp is indicative of the leading tone. So if I see a key signature of F, C, and G sharp, then I look at that last sharp, I say, G sharp, I go up a half step, I know that's the key of A. Or I can remember my clock, my circle of fifths clock, and remember that A has 3 sharps. Let's take a look at some major mode key signatures. Here we have the clock on the right-hand side as reference, and we have some key signatures on the left-hand side. We have 2 flats, that's B flat and E flat. So I can either remember that the key with 2 flats in it is B flat by remembering my clock or constructing it. Or I can look at that key signature and say, I'll look at the second to last flat, that's B flat, and indeed it is the key of B flat major. If we take a look at the key signature with 4 sharps, I can remember it in 2 ways. Either I can remember that E has 4 sharps, or I can look at that last sharp in the order and say, D sharp is the leading tone that will lead up to E. That is a half step below E. So that's E major. The key of 1 flat, we can't, if we remember that for flat keys we look at the second to last flat, there is only 1 flat here, but that's the key that we memorize, that's going to be F major. And here's that key that we were looking at before, F, C, and G sharp. We know that G sharp will be the leading tone, that last sharp, and will resolve up to A.